very strongly.
As we're
how much
discussing this
energy-
evening, several energy-related bills are making their way through the legislative process in this session, and several are raising significant concerns among environmentalists. Joining us now is Angie Rosser, Executive Director of the West Virginia Rivers Coalition. Angie, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thanks for the opportunity to talk with you.
So, Angie, you describe yourself and your organization as supportive of jobs and supportive of people, the health of people, and the health of our state. Specifically with the co-tenancy bill, as we discussed earlier, you say on the surface it's about owners' rights, which you're all about, but it's also about increased productivity and massive build-outs of pipelines.
Right, so it's putting a bill like co-tenancy in the bigger context, thinking about what we're seeing with more pipelines, more compressor stations, Appalachian storage hub, $84 billion in money coming from China. It just, when you put it all together, it's talking about more drilling, more chemicals introduced into our environment, more waste, toxic waste that we're going to have to manage. And as this development rapidly increases, it's also having a bigger footprint across West Virginia. So we're seeing more well pads, more impoundments located closer to homes, closer to schools, closer to source water protection areas where we need to protect for our drinking water safety. So it's a rapid expansion, and I think the sentiment or the concern is are we really ready for it? And are we spending the time we should be thinking about environmental and public health concerns as we are thinking about how to grow the industry very quickly?
Now, what is your reaction to Senator Smith's comments about the Regulatory Reform Act now under consideration regarding the expediting of the permitting process and his position on the provided public input policies?
Right, so the Regulatory Reform Act is moving through the House. So in all fairness, maybe he hasn't seen the latest version, but it clearly is intended to expedite the permitting process for certain projects that the Development Office deems worthy. And in terms of public transparency, all of that decision making is couched in the Development Office to decide which projects will get this favor of an expedited process and which won't. And the public won't know about which projects qualify or are selected until after the decisions are made.
Now, environmentalists and conservationists such as yourself have expressed a fear of development being fast-tracked and that there are long-term consequences that go along with rushing things through.
Right, and it goes back to what we're seeing here is that there's a lot of attention from the administration, from the legislature, on how do we help industry to grow. Well, at the same time, we would like to see equal time devoted to making sure with this growth that we are protecting our people and protecting our water and land. And an example I have of where we feel like the legislature is falling short is that in 2011 we passed the Horizontal Well Control Act. In that were mandated studies to look at what does this development mean for people's health, including exposure to noise, dust, air, light pollution, the risk to water. Those studies were completed and available in 2013, but still 5 years later, the legislature has not acted on those recommendations to protect public health.
So what other reactions have you heard among legislators about environmental concerns with these various bills that are running through?
You know, it's a really difficult space to talk about environmental protection because they hear environmental regulation as an impediment to industry growth. When we're saying, you know, we can have both, we just need to look at both at the same time. You know, I think the overall attitude we're seeing with a moratorium from the governor on no more regulations, no more rulemaking, we're seeing this Regulatory Reform Act, we're seeing just an overall attitude about less regulation means more jobs, but we're not also talking about it, less regulation means more vulnerability to our water, land, and our people.
Now, it's been your opinion that the DEP pretty much has tunnel vision. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I think there's a lot, not just at the DEP, but also legislator and the leadership we have here, is let's look at what we can make happen quickly and what those short-term needs we have to revive the economy, to recover from a coal decline, without really thinking about the long-term consequences. So when I think tunnel vision, it's also short-term vision. We're looking at economic growth, but then not the long-term consequences of what economic price there may be to pay if we move too hastily or carelessly on these kind of projects.
Now, we just talked to Senator Smith about the coal bill, which was advanced to third reading today. Know that you're focused on the degrading of water quality standards on both Senate Bill 290 and Senate Bill 626, which is the coal bill. That you say serves industry and not citizens. Can you elaborate on some of your concerns with these two bills?
Well, the coal bill's been really difficult because it's a different process. It was originated in the Senate Energy, Industry, and Mining Committee. So it didn't actually become publicly available until Monday night, just this week, and it's being voted on tomorrow. So it gives the public very limited time to do our own analysis and educate the public, educate lawmakers, weigh in on what the implications of striking a whole section of the Water Pollution Control Act would be. And this was a bill that was brought forth by the Coal Association. And they're looking into how it benefits their industry, and we're just not getting equal time or opportunity with the way this process has been fast-tracked to be able to weigh in and really contemplate and look at some of the very highly technical aspects of the bill that they'll be voting on tomorrow.
And there was also some public notice concerns as well.
That's right. They're making a fundamental change in how public notice of mining permits will be made. Instead of publishing those in the newspapers, they're more reliant on electronic means, which may be a good direction to head, but because not every citizen of this state has access to broadband internet connections, we're not ready for that. So until we get people access to be able to access that online notice, those local publications in those small papers, especially in rural communities where coal activity is happening most, is still essential.
Now, you've also been following Senate Bill 270, and that's the logging bill in state parks. What's the coalition's perspective on this, and is it pretty much dead at this point? Because we have crossover day on Monday.
That's right. It's coming down to the wire here. And I was encouraged this week when I heard from a senator that he has gotten more calls and letters and contacts in opposition to the state park logging bill than any other bill this session. So to me, that was an indication that this thing is dying. I mean, the public outcry about starting to log in state parks that people, identify.
I should say that that's the Senate bill, meaning that they're coming into session right now. So that's the noise that we were hearing just now.
That's right. But that's kind of what is happening in the public about this logging bill. Is the alarms are going off for people. There are other places where logging occurs on state lands, but when people said they wanted to start it in state parks, it was like, no, hands off our state parks.
Well, what's your message to the legislature as far as some of these bills going through?
Well, what's interesting is there's resistance to more regulation and rulemaking, but the bills they're passing this session are going to require rulemaking. So the discussion isn't over. There are a lot of details to be worked out, and that will come before the legislature again, but we're definitely heading in a direction of rolling back environmental protections, which I think has a lot of people in this state concerned.
Well, we thank you so much for your perspective. Again, we have Angie Rosser with the West Virginia Rivers Coalition.
Thanks, Andrea.